Peace and blessings, friends. Welcome back for your next installment of The Second Ring of Power. Part 4, The Transformation of Doña, Soledad. And it is a gloriously slow Sunday morning over here. We in our comfy clothes. We comfy. As much as I would love to be posting these videos on Tuesdays and Saturdays, life seems to be presenting me with Wednesdays and Sundays. That's the track record thus far. And my intention really was Tuesdays and Saturdays. I have a special connection with those days. So I thought that would be great. But that has not been met yet. So perhaps we now say Wednesdays and Sundays. Perhaps what we really ought to say is we intend to post twice a week. Let's start there, because that we can celebrate. That we have been consistent with thus far. And that is the intention, to continue that. Because part of this, I'm working on some things here, yeah? I'm experimenting, as I've said. I really do need to work on my social wellness. I am in building community, or being part of community, being a solid member of a community. For it has become rather clear, rather apparent, that we can't do this alone. I say that with quotes because, I mean, it's been said. And there is some truth there. It seems. I haven't really been a solid explorer of that to actually verify. So this is where we're experimenting with this within our means. Great segue, I suppose. Today's excerpt is being brought to you by An Empowered Mental Projector Life. This is the episode 1 of season 2 from the No Choice Love Yourself podcast. It is a lovely conversation between two mental projectors. Now, mental projector is a term, a subtype of the projector aura field, according to the Human Design System, which I appreciate and study. 2016 was perhaps when Human Design really started to dance with me, but I wasn't really ready for the two-step yet. So 2018, that's when I took my first Jovian class, the Living Your Design for projectors. And it was only projectors in there, led by a projector. And it was a good class and great information. Really loved it. Really dived in. And then I took Rave ABCs and really kind of got into human design. And then sort of backed away because it was getting too heady. There was just too much. There's the PHS, there's the arrows, there's the lines, there's the aura, there's the I Ching, there's the gates. And then people were going into, your environment and how you should eat and your temperatures. I was like, whoa. I don't think any of us really have this idea integrated in our bodies yet of even our aura type and strategy. So the two women in this conversation are both mental projectors. Now, the subtype of projectors, so projector is primarily defined by not having their sacral, they're non-sacral beings, so they don't have their sacral center defined, and there's no energy center connected to the throat. They might have connections to the throat from non-energy centers, such as the ajna. And so mental projectors have no definition beneath their throat at all. So there's 3 types. You can have a head ajna connection, an ajna throat connection, or you can have all 3 connected. Now, again, when I first kind of started dabbling in human design, and granted, human design has been around for a while, so I don't want to get that twisted, but when I was out in the field, I could not find a lot of information about mental projectors. Mental projectors are like 2% of the population. There aren't a whole lot of them. Most folks are generators, manifesting generators. They have the sacral defined. So finding a lot of information about mental projectors was pretty rare, and certainly any mental projectors that had the ajna throat connection. And then what I loved about these two is they both have a split channel that's conscious and unconscious, which means that it primarily acts unconsciously, which is similar to me. And so all three of us only have the ajna and throat defined. The host, Pragya Beniwal, she's a 2-4 mental projector with the 1762. That's the channel of acceptance and a design of an organizational being, and is part of the collective circuitry. Then her guest is Simone Forster, and she's a 1-3 mental projector with the 4323 channel of structuring. It's a design of individuality, also called from genius to freak. I have a lot of genius to freaks in my world as I've looked at their designs, so I'm familiar with those folks. And that's part of the individual circuitry. And I'm a 5-2 mental projector, according to the Human Design System, and I have the 1156 channel, which is the channel of curiosity, a design of a searcher. It's also part of the collective circuitry, and it's also called a channel of a storyteller. So it was a really fascinating conversation. If you're into human design, if you're curious about the projector, mental projector, especially process, it was a really lovely conversation. It felt really good to me, and I enjoyed it. And so part of the mental projector strategy is, so all projectors have the strategy to wait for the invitation. Then mental projectors don't have an inner authority, so their authority is called outer authority, whereas other designs have something as defined by human design, definite, that they can point to in their bodies as a direct sensation. The mental projector processes is verbalizing and soundboarding and hearing themselves, hearing their frequency, feeling then what it feels like after, observing oneself, after listening to oneself. So I'm big upping that episode. I'm big upping that share. That felt really good for me, and I enjoyed it. And that's, again, so that brings me back to part of this experiment here. So on the one hand, this is me experimenting with my voice and listening to these things and hearing the frequency and hearing how it feels, and feeling into my body what it is that's being said and the things that I feel. So these little talking bits at first are part of that. And then the channel of the storyteller, while I'm working on developing that confidence and assurance with self, with developing the voice, why not read someone else's stories? Let's experiment and see if this is kind of how it plays out. I mean, the other thing is projectors are able to emanate their energy. We all emanate our energy, but projectors, it's a very penetrative sort of thing, and we all attract. So this channel, this YouTube channel, is a design to connect with my peeps, build the tribe, and start exploring being there with the community. Like, I am quick to turn off my notifications. I just people all the time. But, I really want to respond to comments, and I would love to engage in discourse and get comfortable with making time for quality interactions like such, rather than watching Karen videos, freaking out on YouTube. Oh, it is my indulgence. So that's part of that. Yeah, that's what we're working with. That's the experiment. That's cards on the table. If you don't know, now you know. So part of this is encouraging comments, encouraging subscribes, encouraging viewers, right? Like, ooh, my people, let's come together. Whatever needs to be It will be, just got to keep showing up, right? So I do want to shout out and give thanks for the comments that I've received thus far since starting the Carlos Castaneda text reading. So shout out to Wayne, the legit XY to my being. Thank you. Love you. Love you so much. And to Philip. Don't know you in the world as far as I know. But thank you for your comments. And please, more people, more. If you feel like it. If not, that's cool too. And also, my women, I would love to hear if any of you have experienced your wind speaking to you through your womb, or your womb speaking to you. I would just love to hear your experiences, especially if you have read through the Castaneda texts and you've been exploring the awareness exercises, tasks, and taking some of this into account and experimenting with it in your life. I would be so curious to hear about that, if you're willing to share. But feel free to share anything, men, women. I'm cool with it, and I'll do my best to reply and engage and develop my social wellness. So thank you for helping me. Thank you. Thank you for helping me. And now, it is time. You already know. Sippy sip. Now, right after saying I prefer a warm beverage, and I do, I also like a chilled beverage. And I was really craving something apple flavored, so, and it was just a blessing when I was working yesterday. My colleague presented me with a crisp apple Dr. D's organic sparkling probiotic drink. Delicious gut support. And I'll tell you, it is delicious. It's definitely hitting on that apple flavor craving we was having. I mean, it certainly has more carbs than I would normally ingest, and it's due to 14 grams of sugar. But to be fair, it is organic, fair trade cane sugar. And then there's some other good stuff, Live Cultures, kefir. Not sponsored, but definitely tasty. Heard it was at Publix. Okay. And now, part 4, the transformation of Doña Soledad. I didn't even take a sip. I did all that talking. And now, the continuation of the second ring of power. Part 4, the transformation of Doña Soledad. A woman, of course, is much more supple than a man. A woman changes very easily with the power of a sorcerer, especially with the power of a sorcerer like the Nahual. A male apprentice, according to the Nahual, is extremely difficult. For example, you yourself hasn't changed as much as La Gorda, and she started her apprenticeship way after you did. A woman is softer and more gentle, and above all, a woman is like a gourd. She receives. But somehow, a man commands more power. The Nahual never agreed with that, though. He believed that women are unequaled, tops. He also believed that I felt men were better only because I am an empty woman. He must be right. I've been empty for so long that I can't remember what it feels like to be complete. The Nahual said that if I ever become complete, I will change my feelings about it. But if he was right, his Gorda would have done as well as Eligio, and as you know, she hasn't. I could not follow the flow of her narrative because of her unstated assumption that I knew what she was referring to. In this case, I had no idea what Eligio or La Gorda had done. In what way was La Gorda different from Eligio? I asked. She looked at me for a moment, as if measuring something in me. Then she sat up with her knees against her chest. The Nahual told me everything, she said briskly. The Nahual had no secrets from me. Eligio was the best. That's why he's not in the world now. He didn't return. In fact, he was so good that he didn't have to jump from a precipice when his apprenticeship was over. He was like Gennaro. One day while he was working in the field, something came to him and took him away. He knew how to let go. I felt like asking her if I had really jumped into the abyss. I deliberated for a moment before going ahead with my question. After all, I had come to see Pablito and Nestor to clarify that point. Any information I could get on the topic from anyone involved in Don Juan's world was indeed a bonus to me. She laughed at my question, as I had anticipated. "You mean you don't know what you yourself did?" she asked. "It's too far-fetched to be real," I said. "That is the Nahual's world for sure. Not a thing in it is real. He himself told me not to believe anything. But still, the male apprentices have to jump, unless they are truly magnificent like Eligio. The Nahual took us, me and La Gorda, to that mountain and made us look down to the bottom of it. There he showed us the kind of flying Nahual he was, but only La Gorda could follow him. She wanted to jump into the abyss. The Nahual told her that that was useless. He said female warriors have to do things more painful and more difficult than that. He also told us that the jump was only for the four of you, and that is what happened. The four of you jumped. She had said that the four of us had jumped, but I only knew of Pablito and myself having done that night. In light of her statements, I figured that Don Juan and Don Gennaro must have followed us. That did not seem odd to me. It was rather pleasing and touching. "What are you talking about?" she asked after I had voiced my thoughts. "I meant you and the three apprentices of Gennaro, you, Pablito, and Nestor, jumped on the same day." "Who is the other apprentice of Don Gennaro? I know only of Pablito and Nestor." "You mean that you didn't know that Benino was Gennaro's apprentice?" "No, I didn't." "He was Gennaro's oldest apprentice. He jumped before you did, and he jumped by himself." Benino was one of 5 Indian youths I had once found while roaming in the Sonoran desert with Don Juan. They were in search of power objects. Don Juan told me that all of them were apprentices of sorcery. I struck up a peculiar friendship with Benino in the few times I had seen him after that day. He was from southern Mexico. I liked him very much. For some unknown reason, he seemed to delight himself by creating a tantalizing mystery about his personal life. I could never find out who he was or what he did. Every time I talked to him, he baffled me with the disarming candor with which he evaded my probes. Once, Don Juan volunteered some information about Benino and said that he was very fortunate in having found a teacher and a benefactor. I took Don Juan's statements as a casual remark that meant nothing. Doña Soledad had clarified a 10-year-old mystery for me. "Why do you think Don Juan never told me anything about Benino?" "Who knows? He must have had a reason." The Nahual never did anything thoughtlessly. I had to prop my aching back against her bed before resuming writing. "Whatever happened to Benino?" "He's doing fine. He's perhaps better off than anyone else. You'll see him. He's with Pablito and Nestor. Right now they're inseparable. Gennaro's brand is on them. The same thing happened to the girls. They're inseparable because the Nahual's brand is on them." I had to interrupt her again and ask her to explain what girls she was talking about. "My girls," she said. "Your daughters? I mean, Pablito's sisters?" "They are not Pablito's sisters. They are the Nahual's apprentices." Her disclosure shocked me. Ever since I had met Pablito years before, I had been led to believe that the 4 girls who lived in his house were his sisters. Don Juan himself had told me so. I had a sudden relapse of the feeling of despair I had experienced all afternoon. Doña Soledad was not to be trusted. She was engineering something. I was sure that Don Juan would not, under any conditions, have misled me so grossly. Doña Soledad examined me with overt curiosity. "The wind just told me that you don't believe what I'm telling you," she said, and laughed. "The wind is right," I said dryly. "The girls that you've seen over the years are the Nahuals. They were his apprentices. Now that the Nahual is gone, they are the Nahual himself. but they are also my girls, mine. You mean that you are not Pablito's mother, and they are really your daughters? I mean that they are mine. The Nahual gave them to me for safekeeping. You are always wrong because you rely on words to explain everything. Since I am Pablito's mother, and you heard that they were my girls, you figured out that they must be brother and sisters. The girls are my true babies. Pablito, although he's the child that came out of my womb, is my mortal enemy. My reaction to her statements was a mixture of revulsion and anger. I thought that she was not only an aberrated woman, but a dangerous one. Somehow, part of me had known that since the moment I had arrived. She watched me for a long time. To avoid looking at her, I sat down on the bedspread again. The Nahual warned me about your weirdness, she said suddenly, but I couldn't understand what he meant. Now I know. He told me to be careful and not to anger you because you are violent. I'm sorry I was not as careful as I should have been. He also said that as long as you can write, you could go to hell itself and not even feel it. I haven't bothered you about that. Then he told me that you're suspicious because words entangle you. I haven't bothered you there either. I've been talking my head off, trying not to entangle you. There was a silent accusation in her tone. I felt somehow embarrassed at being annoyed with her. What you're telling me is very hard to believe, I said. Either you or Don Juan has lied to me terribly. Neither of us has lied. You understand only what you want to. The Nahual said that that is a condition of your emptiness. The girls are the Nahual's children, just like you and Eligio are his children. He made 6 children, 4 women and 2 men. Gennaro made 3 men. There are 9 altogether. One of them, Eligio, already made it. So now it is up to the 8 of you to try. Where did Eligio go? He went to join the Nahual and Gennaro. And where did the Nahual and Gennaro go? You know where they went. You're just kidding me, aren't you? But that's the point, Doña Soledad. I'm not kidding you. Then I will tell you. I can't deny you anything. The Nahual and Gennaro went back to the same place they came from, to the outer world. When their time was up, they simply stepped out into the darkness out there, and since they did not want to come back, the darkness of the night swallowed them up. I felt it was useless to probe her any further. I was ready to change the subject, but she spoke first. You caught a glimpse of the other world when you jumped, she went on. But maybe the jump has confused you. Too bad. There is nothing that anyone can do about it. It is your fate to be a man. Women are better than men in that sense. They don't have to jump into an abyss. Women have their own ways. They have their own abyss. Women menstruate. The Nahual told me that that was the door for them. During their period, they become something else. I know that that was the time when he taught my girls. It was too late for me. I'm too old, so I really don't know what that door looks like. But the Nahual insisted that the girls pay attention to everything that happens to them during that time. He would take them during those days into the mountains and stay with them there until they would see the crack between the worlds. The Nahual, since he had no qualms or fears about doing anything, pushed them without mercy so they could find out for themselves that there is a crack in women, a crack that they disguise very well. During their period, no matter how well made their disguise is, it falls away and women are bare. The Nahual pushed my girls until they were half dead to open that crack. They did it. He made them do it, but it took them years. How did they become apprentices? Lydia was his first apprentice. He found her one morning when he had stopped at a disheveled hut in the mountains. The Nahual told me that there was no one in sight, and yet there had been omens calling him to that house since early morning. The breeze had bothered him terribly. He said that he couldn't even open his eyes every time he tried to walk away from that area. So when he found the house, he knew that something was there. He looked under a pile of straw and twigs and found a girl. She was very ill. She could hardly talk, but still she told him that she didn't need anyone to help her. She was going to keep on sleeping there, and if she didn't wake up anymore, no one would lose a thing. The Nahual liked her spirit and talked to her in her language. He told her that he was going to cure her and take care of her until she was strong again. She refused. She was an Indian who had known only hardships and pain. She told the Nahual that she had already taken all the medicine that her parents had given her, and nothing helped. The more she talked, the more the Nahual understood that the omen had pointed her out to him in a most peculiar way. The omen was more like a command. The Nahual picked the girl up and put her on his shoulders, like a child, and brought her to Gennaro's place. Gennaro made medicine for her. She couldn't open her eyes anymore. The lids were stuck together. They were swollen and had a yellowish crud on them. They were festering. The Nahual tended her until she was well. He hired me to look after her and cook her meals. I helped her to get well with my food. She is my first baby. When she was well, and that took nearly a year, the Nahual wanted to return her to her parents, but the girl refused to go and went with him instead. A short time after he had found Lydia, while she was still sick and in my care, the Nahual found you. You were brought to him by a man he had never seen before in his life. The Nahual saw that the man's death was hovering above his head, and he found it very odd that the man would point you out to him at such a time. You made the Nahual laugh, and right away the Nahual set a test for you. He didn't take you. He told you to come and find him. He has tested you ever since, like he has tested no one else. He said that that was your path. For 3 years he had only 2 apprentices, Lydia and you. Then, one day while he was visiting his friend Vicente, a cure from the north, some people brought in a crazy girl, a girl who did nothing else but cry. The people took the Nahual for Vicente and placed the girl in his hands. The Nahual told me that the girl ran to him and clung to him as if she knew him. The Nahual told her parents that they had to leave her with him. They were worried about the cost, but the Nahual assured them that it would be free. I suppose that the girl was such a pain in the ass to them that they didn't mind getting rid of her. The Nahual brought her to me. That was hell. She was truly crazy. That was Josefina. It took the Nahual years to cure her. But even to this day, she's crazier than a bat. She was, of course, crazy about the Nahual, and there was a terrible fight between Lydia and Josefina. They hated each other, but I liked them both. But the Nahual, when he saw that they couldn't get along, became very firm with them. As you know, the Nahual can't get mad at anyone, so he scared them half to death. One day, Lydia got mad and left. She had decided to find herself a young husband. On the road, she found a tiny chicken. It had just been hatched and was lost in the middle of the road. Lydia picked it up, and since she was in a deserted area with no houses around, she figured that the chicken belonged to no one. She put it inside her blouse and between her breasts to keep it warm. Lydia told me that she ran, and in doing so, the little chicken began to move to her side. She tried to bring him back to the front, but she couldn't catch him. The chicken ran very fast around her sides and her back, inside her blouse. The chicken's feet tickled her at first, and then they drove her crazy. When she realized that she couldn't get him out, she came back to me, screaming out of her mind, and told me to get the damn thing out of her blouse. I undressed her, but that was to no avail. There was no chicken at all, and yet she still felt its feet on her skin going around and around. The Nahual came over then and told her that only when she let go of her old self would the chicken stop running. Lydia was crazy for 3 days and 3 nights. The Nahual told me to tie her up. I fed her and cleaned her and gave her water. On the 4th day, she became very peaceful and calm. I untied her and she put on her clothes, and when she was dressed again, as she had been the day she ran away, the little chicken came out. She took him in her hand and petted and thanked him and returned him to the place where she had found him. I walked with her part of the way. From that time on, Lydia never bothered anyone. She accepted her fate. The Nahual is her fate. Without him, she would have been dead. So what was the point of trying to refuse or mold things which can only be accepted? Josefina went off next. She was already afraid of what happened to Lydia, but she soon forgot about it. One Sunday afternoon, when she was coming back to the house, a dry leaf got stuck in the threads of her shawl. Her shawl was loosely woven. She tried to pick out the small leaf, but she was afraid of ruining her shawl. So when she came into the house, she immediately tried to loosen it, but there was no way, it was stuck. Josefina, in a fit of anger, clutched the shawl and the leaf and crumbled it inside her hand. She figured that small pieces would be easier to pick out. I heard a maddening scream, and Josefina fell to the ground. I ran to her and found that she couldn't open her hand. The leaf had cut her hand to shreds as if it were pieces of a razor blade. Lydia and I helped her and nursed her for 7 days. Josefina was more stubborn than anyone else. She nearly died. At the end, she managed to open her hand, but only after she had, in her own mind, resolved to drop her old ways. She still gets pain in her body from time to time, especially in her hand, due to the ugly disposition that still returns to her. The Nahual told both of them that they shouldn't count on their victory because it's a lifetime struggle that each of us wages against our old selves. Lydia and Josefina never fought again. I don't think they like each other, but they certainly get along. I love those two the most. They have been with me all these years. I know that they love me too. What about the other two girls? Where do they fit? A year later, Elena came. She is La Gorda. She was by far in the worst condition you could imagine. She weighed 220 pounds. She was a desperate woman. Pablito had given her shelter in his shop. She did laundry and ironing to support herself. The Nahual came one night to get Pablito and found the fat girl working while a circle of moths flew over her head. He said that the moths had made a perfect circle for him to watch. He saw that the woman was near the end of her life. Yet the moths must have had all the confidence in the world in order for them to give him such an omen. The Nahual acted fast and took her with him. She did fine for a while, but the bad habits that she had learned were too deep and she couldn't give them up. So one day, the Nahual sent for the wind to help her. It was a matter of helping her or finishing her off. The wind began to blow on her until it drove her out of the house. She was alone that day, and no one saw what was happening. The wind pushed her over the hills and into ravines until she fell into a ditch, a hole in the ground like a grave. The wind kept her there for days. When the Nahual finally found her, she had managed to stop the wind, but she was too weak to walk. How did the girls manage to stop whatever was acting upon them? Well, in the first place, what was acting upon them was the gourd that the Nahual carried tied to his belt. And what is in the gourd? The allies that the Nahual carries with him. He said that the ally is funneled through his gourd. Don't ask me anymore because I know nothing more about the ally. All I can tell you is that the Nahual commands 2 allies and makes them help him. In the case of my girls, the ally backed down when they were ready to change. For them, of course, it was a case of either change or death. But that's the case with all of us, one way or another. And La Gorda changed more than anyone else. She was empty. In fact, more empty than I. But she worked her spirit until she became power itself. I don't like her. I'm afraid of her. She knows me. She gets inside me and my feelings, and that bothers me. But no one can do anything to her because she never lets her guard down. She doesn't hate me, but she thinks I am an evil woman. She may be right. I think that she knows me too well, and I'm not as impeccable as I want to be. But the Nahual told me not to worry about my feelings toward her. She is like Ligio. The world no longer touches her. What did the Nahual do to her that was so special? He taught her things he never taught anyone else. He never pampered her or anything like that. He trusted her. She knows everything about everybody. The Nahual also told me everything, except things about her. Maybe that's why I don't like her. The Nahual told her to be my jailer. Wherever I go, I find her. She knows whatever I do. Right now, for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if she shows up. Do you think she would? I doubt it. Tonight, the wind is with me. What is she supposed to do? Does she have a special task? I've told you enough about her. I'm afraid that if I keep on talking about her, she will notice me from wherever she is, and I don't want that to happen. Tell me, then, about the others. Some years after he found La Gorda,